Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining me on A Psychologist Looks at Scripture. I'm Peter Doherty, a Catholic priest and a psychologist, and I am pleased that you can join me. In this podcast, I draw from my background in psychology and scripture studies to provide fresh insights into the Gospels. I also try to apply the Gospel teachings to contemporary realities we are living. The Gospels consistently invite us to deepen our faith, find new wisdom, and grow spiritually. There's always something more to discover. Each episode runs about 7 to 10 minutes. I know you're busy, so I keep my podcast short. If you have the time and are interested, please check out the earlier episodes listed on the podcast website and on YouTube. I would like to thank my listeners. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Your support energizes me to keep podcasting. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments. They truly matter. They help this podcast grow and flourish. The gospel today is from Luke chapter 21, verse 5 to 19. This gospel will be read in churches on November the 16th, 2025. The gospel seems to be a lumping together of several gospel themes. The gospel starts out with the disciples commenting on the beauty of the temple. Jesus surprises them by pointing out that the temple will be destroyed. This actually happened in 70 AD when the temple in Jerusalem, known as the Second Temple, was destroyed by the Roman army during the siege of Jerusalem. The western retaining wall of the Temple Mount, now known as the Western Wall, is the only remnant left. Understandably, the disciples are concerned and ask Jesus about when this would happen. Jesus does not answer the question, but launches into several teachings. I'm not sure if Jesus chose not to answer them, but for the rest of the gospel, we are reading them as a collection of teachings that were later added on. Jesus warns the disciples of calamities ahead, and they themselves will be persecuted. Very likely, this passage was read often by the early Christians in the midst of the persecutions of the early church. While there are challenges ahead, we do get a promise from Jesus that we will not be alone, and we are encouraged to depend on our God for support. The last paragraph is quite scary. Jesus warns us that we will be betrayed, not just by anyone, but by people who are close to us, family members. Experiencing betrayal is, unfortunately, more common than we would like. Being betrayed by those who are close to us is especially hurtful. Betrayal undermines our ability to trust. Have you ever experienced betrayal? Erik Erikson, a German-born American psychoanalyst and developmental psychologist, known for his theory of psychosocial development, outlined 8 stages of developmental stages across the human lifespan. In his classical theory on human development, he listed the development of trust as the first task of the infant. According to his theory, the development of trust is essential for personal development. A lack of trust will lead the individual to have difficulty trusting people, and thus be afraid to explore new situations that would lead to growth. I propose that many people struggle with trusting God stems from a wound or wounds they experience when their trust in a caregiver was undermined. Fortunately, children are resilient and can withstand the occasional breach of trust, but an ongoing series of broken promises may leave the child not trusting what their parent says. This first became clear when studying couples and families where one individual was addicted to something. Addicts are notorious for not keeping their promises. It's no wonder that a child has difficulty trusting God because they have learned they can't trust their parent. Jennifer J. Freed developed betrayal trauma theory, which highlights the profound negative impact of betrayal within interpersonal trauma, such as abuse. Her research demonstrated strong associations between high levels of betrayal trauma and symptoms including depression, anxiety, disassociation, and even physical illness. Her research also introduced the concept of betrayal blindness, a survival mechanism that suppresses conscious awareness of betrayal to preserve a critical relationship or social systems. In 2022, researchers Adam Clark and colleagues expanded on this work by investigating the impact of interpersonal, family, cultural, and institutional betrayal on adult survivors of abuse. Their study emphasized the neurobiological and psychological consequences of betrayal trauma, which include challenges including trust issues, PTSD, depression, emotional detachment, and difficulties forming new relationships. People can be betrayed by anyone. I suspect some of my listeners may have experienced being betrayed by family, employers, employees, colleagues, and even their own church. As pointed out by Erickson, lack of trust can hamper one's psychological growth. It seems to me that the lack of trust can hamper the development of our social skills because we see the world as unsafe. I would go as far as to say that the lack of trust also hampers our spiritual growth. For our purposes today, I will define betrayal as the experience of being harmed by the intentional actions or omissions of a trusted person or party, involving a violation of trust and expectations within an interpersonal relationship. It generally entails one party prioritizing their own interests at the expense of another's, signaling a disregard for the relationship and the betrayal individual's well-being. Betrayal can manifest itself in several forms and may include disloyalty, harmful disclosures, dishonesty, or infidelity, and often leads to psychological consequences, including feelings of rejection, loss, anger, and damaged self-esteem. Betrayal is considered a profound form of interpersonal rejection with significant emotional impact and potential long-term effects on mental health. Betrayal is a prevalent theme in the Gospels. From the moment Jesus was born, there was betrayal. I direct you to Matthew chapter 2, verse 1 to 12, where the wise men who have tracked the star to Bethlehem ask King Herod where the infant king of the Jews is. After consulting with his advisors, he tells the wise men to go and find the child and report back to him so he too can give homage. The scheme almost worked, but the wise men are warned in a dream not to go back to Herod. King Herod lied to the wise men to get information from them so that he could kill the child. He betrayed the wise men who had made it clear to Herod that their intention was to pay homage to the child, not set him up to be killed. Jesus criticized the Pharisees who sold out their heritage and vocation. Instead of helping the people, they laid heavy burdens on the people's backs. We see this in Matthew chapter 23, verse 4. The most well-known example of betrayal is, of course, Judas, and I will get back to him in a minute. Because betrayal is so common, how are we as Christians supposed to respond to betrayal in our lives? I am immediately drawn to the words of Jesus, dying on the cross, where he says, "Forgive them, Father, for they do not know what they are doing." We read this in Luke chapter 23, verse 34. I wonder who exactly they is. Likely all the people responsible for the execution, the guards who carried out the orders, Pilate who gave the final orders, the Sanhedrin for sending Jesus to Pilate, and including Judas, who initially betrayed Jesus. Yes, Jesus forgave his betrayer. I want to point out that forgiveness did not happen in some post-resurrection appearance, but rather while Jesus was in full pain, dying on the cross. Forgiving someone who has betrayed you is difficult, but you do it for yourself. As many of you know, I wrote a book with my co-author, Patty Ann Kay, on forgiveness. Forgiveness, breaking free, and moving on. There are 2 points I want to draw your attention to. First of all, remember that forgiveness is something you do for yourself. You want to reduce the negative impact of the betrayal that you experienced and reinstate your future ability to trust. Secondly, forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. We are not called to reconcile with someone who is toxic and cannot be trusted. See the betrayal as a learning opportunity. Review the situation. Do not get angry, but reflect on the situation to see if there were any warning signs along the way. Don't criticize yourself for missing the signs. You acted in good faith. You trusted. As much as possible, strive to learn from the experience and don't let it lead you to mistrusting others or poisoning your view of humanity. I feel sorry for those who have betrayed me. They are disgraced themselves and they have lost the opportunity for a loyal friendship. There is the real damage of betrayal. Thank you for joining me today. Next Sunday, I'll be sharing a new podcast episode on Luke chapter 3 35 to 43, where we will all hear about Jesus on the cross welcoming one of the robbers who was crucified with him into paradise. If you're new here, I invite you to check our previous episodes on major podcast platforms and on YouTube. And for my regular YouTube listeners, please consider subscribing and sharing the podcast with friends who love Scripture and the human sciences. New episodes come out every Sunday, focusing on the following week's gospel. Your feedback is always valued and helps our community grow. A big thank you to Heather Patel-Doherty and Rachel Coulombe for their wonderful help in preparing each episode. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email me at peter.doherty, that's DOHERTYOMI, @gmail.com. May God richly bless you all.